Good morning. So last Sunday, we finished up several weeks of talking about how it is that we try to use our abundance of blessings in this place to do ministry outside the walls of this place. And next Sunday, we will begin our journey towards Christmas with the Advent season. So in some ways today is sort of a placeholder. It's kind of an in-between Sunday. But it did give me a chance to talk about something that matters a lot to me. So I want to dive right in this morning by sharing with you some really powerful and challenging words. Let me emphasize that. Some really powerful and challenging words from a man whose work has come to mean a great deal to me. He died a couple of weeks back, and I knew when I heard about his death that I wanted to talk to you about him this morning. Stan Lee was 95 years old at the time of his passing. He left behind his wife of 60 years and their children. He was the son of Jewish Romanian parents who immigrated to the United States in the early 1900s before he was born and took up residence in Manhattan. He was a World War II veteran, United States Army. And he was the head of a multi-billion-dollar comic book creation and publishing business that began over 80 years ago as a tiny family-run venture, and for whom he worked the vast majority of his life. And in 1968, when he was the age that I am now, and following the death of Martin Luther King Jr., he published these words. Remember, I said powerful and challenging. Let's lay it right on the line. Bigotry and racism are among the deadliest social ills plaguing the world today. But unlike a team of costume supervillains, they can't be halted with a punch in the snoot or a zap from a ray gun. The only way to destroy them is to expose them, to reveal them for the insidious evils that they are. The bigot is an unreasoning hater, one who hates blindly, fanatically, and indiscriminately. If his hang-up is black men, he hates all black men. If a redhead once offended him, he hates all redheads. If some foreigner beat him to a job, he's down on all foreigners. He hates people he's never seen, people he's never known, with equal intensity and with equal venom. Now, we're not trying to say it's unreasonable for one human being to bug another. But although anyone has the right to dislike another individual, it's totally irrational to condemn an entire race, to despise an entire nation, and to vilify an entire religion. Sooner or later, we must learn to judge each other on our own merits. Sooner or later, if man is ever to be worthy of his destiny, we must fill our hearts with tolerance. For then, and only then, will we be truly worthy of the concept that man was created in the image of God, a God who calls us all his children. Amen. Peace and justice, Stan. Stan Lee was the former publisher, editor-in-chief, and chairman of Marvel Comics. He was the co-creator of superheroes like Spider-Man, Iron Man, Captain America, Black Widow, the Guardians of the Galaxy, and the X-Men. Superheroes that have risen to prominence again over the last 10 to 15 years as a whole new series of Marvel movies have lit up the big screen. But these folks have been around for 50 years or more. And you may never have seen a Marvel movie, but maybe you had a Captain America comic book as a kid. Maybe you dressed up as Spider-Man for Halloween. Maybe you watched the Incredible Hulk TV show when you were in elementary school. I really wanted to wear my Wonder Woman cape this morning. But the thing is, Wonder Woman's a creation of DC Comics, and that just felt like Stan Lee would not be happy about that, because she's not his. But if you have met any of these characters, no matter how, comic book, TV show, costume, you have Stan Lee to thank. It's also worth noting that under Stan Lee's leadership, Marvel was the first publisher of its kind to create a black superhero, Black Panther. And not 2 years ago when the movie came out. He did it in 1966. And in 1975, he created the first female black superhero, Storm. Not only did this take creativity and bravery, but it meant that for the first time, little boys and girls of color saw someone who looked like them in comic books and TV shows. Now, you may not be a comic book or a superhero sort of person. My dad isn't, and he wondered what the heck I was doing today. And like I said, you might not have seen a single Marvel movie, and you might even be wondering why it matters, especially on a Sunday morning in worship. And I get it. Marvel Universe is a fictional one, even if some of us try to pretend it's not. Sort of like Star Wars, or Harry Potter, or Star Trek. Universes that are so real to many of us as the world that we live in. Characters that inhabit our lives and teach us and delight us. Stories that help us see life in a different way, and maybe even help us understand our own life better. Y'all, there's a reason Jesus taught in parable. It helps us see and learn in ways that we would not normally see and learn. And so no, the Marvel Universe is not real in the scientific, provable sense. But it is full of truth about what it means to be human. What it means to live in very complicated times. What it means to stand up to evil. So I want to come back to that quote from the beginning in a little bit, but before I do that, I want to tell you a little bit more about why I think this work matters. And I want to do that by telling you a number of things that I have, if not learned, at least been reminded of by watching Marvel movies over the last decade, especially in the last couple of years. Things that have made me think deeply about what it means to be human and what it means to have faith. I have been reminded that not a one of us can do everything, and we certainly can't do it alone. As gifted and powerful and above average as Mr. Lee's heroes are, they all have their limitations, in addition to the unique superpowers they have. And this is what both the Avengers series and the Guardians of the Galaxy series help teach us. Entire teams of heroes assembled to fight evil. Each of them having to acknowledge that not even as superheroes can they do it alone. I once heard someone refer to Jesus' disciples as the original small group. And this is what I'm reminded of when I watch Stan Lee's heroes band together and do their thing. They're in it together and they're a little bit dysfunctional. And they don't agree on a plan of attack or even a plan of defense, but somehow they figure it out and they work towards the common good. Y'all, we cannot do this life alone. We weren't created to, and our God has never asked us to. I've been reminded of the truth watching Stan Lee movies that no one is perfect. Not even seemingly flawless superheroes. So most superheroes have an alter human ego. For Iron Man, that's Tony Stark, an incredibly successful entrepreneur who has more money than he knows what to do with. And he really struggles with how to balance that immense wealth with his humanity and dances at the edge of alcohol abuse as he does. The Incredible Hulk is, as his human alter ego, a mild-mannered scientist named Bruce Banner. And it's only in his rage that he's able to be Hulk. Deep, violent, erupting rage. I listened to a radio program this week about a young man who's a fan of Mr. Lee's work, and he specifically referenced Hulk. The young man's father was a Vietnam veteran who came home and was diagnosed with severe post-traumatic stress disorder that manifested itself as rage. And this young man said that he owed his reconciliation to his father, to Stan Lee. Because in watching the story of Hulk, he was able to see how a person can be very good and have the best of hearts and still be battling demons that are sometimes beyond their control. I don't know what the statistics of Vietnam are, but I know that since 2002, some 120,000 deployed vets of Afghanistan and Iraq have been diagnosed with PTSD. Diagnosed. If you include the possible undiagnosed, that number skyrockets. And so if even one of those families is able to see hope because of a superhero movie, I'm all for it. Wolverine is another one of Marvel's characters, one of the X-Men. And Wolverine is my favorite, and it's not just because Hugh Jackman plays him in the movies. Wolverine grapples with this very deep loss. He's lost almost everyone in his life that's meant anything to him. And at the same time, his powers have been exploited by those who would want to use them for evil. And so as he's trying to do the right thing, he's battling with everything inside him that's wrong. Peter Quill, star of the Guardians of the Galaxy series, spends his whole life battling the grief of losing his mother at a young age and the very problematic relationship he has with his father. These are flawed, hurting people, y'all. Just like we hurt. Our pain and our grief mirrored in the stories of these heroes. And so I'm reminded of King David, a murderer and an adulterer who Scripture makes pretty clear is chosen by God to help God's people do great things. And I'm reminded of Mary Magdalene, beset with demons, ostracized by society, rumored about, an outcast, and yet one of Jesus' closest companions, most faithful followers, and truest friends. And I'm reminded of Zacchaeus, a wayward and unpopular tax collector who Jesus chose to serve as an example of the kind of extravagant welcome offered to each of us as God's children. Stan Lee has helped me remember that it is possible again and again for good to triumph, even when it seems it won't. Even when evil seems more powerful, more all-encompassing, and more pervasive, even when it seems like the bad guys always win. Even then and always, eventually, when good people join together to do the right thing, love wins. And I've remembered how much we need heroes. How much we need young King David to conquer Goliath. How much we need Queen Esther. There's a whole book about her in the Bible. How much we need Queen Esther to stand up to the king and say, no, this isn't right. I discovered this last week that the University of Richmond has a blog on their website dedicated entirely to the study of heroes and our need for them. And so I read several blog posts this week. And one of the things that really resonated with me are these words: independent of our own personal well-being, we cannot help but realize that the world is generally a troubled place, rife with warfare, poverty, famine, and unrest. Heroes are beacons of light amidst this darkness. Heroes prove to us that no matter how much suffering there is in the world, there are supremely good people around. And we can count on to do the right thing, even when most people are not. Heroes bring light into a dark world. In other words, heroes give us hope. And I'm going to guess that when Stan Lee spoke those words in 1968, the United States felt like it was a place where we desperately needed the light to overcome the darkness. And I'm just going to go ahead and say that in 2018, the United States feels like a place where we need light to overcome the darkness. I want to go back to those really blunt and challenging words I read to you of Stan Lee's a few moments ago. Look, I don't know what Stan Lee's religious or faith story is like. I don't need to know. But what I do know is that someone who can speak such powerful and brave words during one of the most turbulent times in our nation's history, 1968, that's being more than a superhero. That's being prophetic. Like the prophets Isaiah or Amos in the Bible, folks called upon to speak truth during dark and difficult times, reminding us that the world we live in is God's, and we are not God. We are God's children. And that means that, thank God, we do not get to call the shots, especially when we do so out of hate or rage or division, because such things are not of God. What I know is that Stan Lee used his gifts and opportunities and resources for good, just as he wrote his characters too. And here's why I think that matters. Because so can you and I. It does not, after all, require superpowers. And we might not have the capacity to create an entire universe, but we for sure can make a difference in the universe we actually live in the communities that we live in. And if you don't believe me, take a look around the walls of this sanctuary and look at the pictures of the ministry that's been done outside of this place. We can be people who use our gifts for good. We have been created as such. We can be people who recognize how much it matters to make room for light and goodness to shine. Who in our families and our workplaces and our circles of friends do justice and love kindness and walk humbly with our God. Because the thing is, I'm not really talking about Stan Lee. I'm talking about you and me. And as much as Spider-Man or Iron Man or even Ant-Man might inspire us to goodness and greatness, they aren't actually going to do it for us. That's up to you and me. To love without condition. To offer grace when it's needed, and to help those who need help. These things, my friends, are superpowers. And we do them all as we seek to love God and follow Jesus as best we can. In all times and places. Because that is what our faith has called us to. And so may it be so. Amen.